Welcome to the show, guys. We're talking starts and sits for fantasy football. Can you believe it, Jim? Week 16 is here. Welcome to the show, Jim. What's happening, man?
I'm doing all right. Yeah, it's basically one more week, and then that's it for fantasy football, and then you just get the playoffs in the Super Bowl. So it's all good. It's good
Yeah.
stuff.
Yeah, and then we'll start rolling out the 2024 content, projections, like ridiculously early rankings. We're going to dive into that. But today, Jim, we're going to be talking about the latest news and notes. We're going to talk about all the optimal players to start at each position. So we're going to go position by position and briefly talk about the games that we like. So we're not doing a full matchup per matchup. We're just going by position, giving you the optimal starts based on matchup on paper, based on statistical algorithm on who is set up for a good matchup. So I'm excited to dive in. Again, starting off with the latest news and notes here. You know I got to cue in our breaking news. Stop. All right, I'm excited to talk starts and sits here, but who is actually sitting due to injury that we know off the bat, Jim? I mean, Jamar Chase is the one that's kind of jumping out at me. He's got that AC joint sprain in his shoulder, expected to miss at least a week. Well, I mean, that's unfortunate, isn't it?
It is unfortunate. If you happen to make the fantasy semifinals with Jamar Chase on your team, congratulations, man. It has not been a good year for Jamar, but CJ Stroud also probably going to miss this week. Chris Olave, I think he's practicing now, but he's a maybe. Didn't Trevor Lawrence get injured too? Trevor Lawrence had
Yeah, he was banged up. I think he's going to be good to go, though, for this week.
not as if that really matters for fantasy playoff purposes, but it can affect Etienne's performance. It can affect Ridley's performance. If he doesn't play, so that sort of thing. So
Let me pull up the news here. I got he's in concussion protocol after waiving Nathan Rourke. Yeah, he's still under concussion protocol. So, yeah,
right.
I don't really care for Trevor Lawrence this year. He's pissed me off a lot. Pissed off a lot of people. Mind you, I never ended up having him on my teams, but again, I had high hopes for him. Did not deliver on any level, for that matter.
He did not. And one other big name on concussion protocol is Pittman, and that one does directly impact one of my playoff teams. So I'm very I'm a little bit concerned there that he's probably not going to play because he's been great this year.
CJ Stroud as well will be missing time, still under concussion protocol. He will not play week 16. Very unfortunate there. Aaron Rodgers says, also in news with Aaron Rodgers, he will not play again for the 2023 season. He's just going to let it play out, obviously, understandably so. Why bring him back? Force another injury potentially, right? And apparently he's saying the 2024 will not be his last season, and it's really based on his health. If he can maintain a good health, he's going to continue to play for a longer time. So I don't know what you think about that. Aaron Rodgers could be strong into his mid-40s maybe.
Maybe, but who's the only other person that ever did that? It was Tom Brady. Everybody else is pretty much I mean, he's already past his expiration date. So it's like, would you really trust him? I mean, like next year, let's talk about next year's draft. Rodgers is the starter. He's healthy. How high are you on guys like Breece Hall and Garrett Wilson if that's the case?
Higher. I actually do think Garrett Wilson will thrive with Aaron Rodgers coming back. I think this is, that was supposed to be this year's narrative. And Wilson did okay. He was relatively consistent in many games with Zach Wilson throwing him the ball. So he only gets an upgrade. He gets a boost. And I think that if they think that, Garrett Wilson is going to suck, I think we can get Garrett Wilson for better value. We could get a wide receiver on potentially rounds 2 to 3. We're gonna have to see what the ADP the Concheapses kind of lay him out at. But I think he's going to be good value next year as long as people kind of sleep on the fact that, maybe Aaron Rodgers is old or something like that. Should be interesting. We'll be watching that situation for sure.
I'm just concerned about Aaron Rodgers turning into a game manager, where he's no longer able to really push that ball down the field just because of his age. Dude's like, 41 this year, 42, something like that.
No, I don't know.
And most quarterbacks are no good after about age 36. And he's definitely been fantastic past that age. But the only person that did it into his mid 40s was Brady. And I'm not sure if Rodgers can make it there.
Brett Favre was pretty good, wasn't he? I think he played into his 40s as well.
He did play into his 40s. Yeah, there's examples of players playing into their 40s. I don't think anybody played as late as Brady did. But it's just the risk associated with a player of that age is very high, and I'm not sure I'm willing to take on that risk, because look what happened this year. I mean, he got injured on like the
Yeah.
fourth play of the year.
That
You know,
that's
it
gonna be
was
I don't know.
like,
I disagree. I think he still has another good year or 2 left in him. I think the talent is there. The experience is there, and his talent. I mean, he's one of the best to ever do it. So I think he's a special case, and I think that was just a fluke injury. I don't think that's gonna happen again. Hopefully not anyway. So
hopefully not. Yeah, that would be terrible. So
yeah, it's going to be interesting to see for next year, but I like the value of Garrett Wilson. Hopefully, good value. Other than that, 2 more quick things. Ty Chandler is absolutely the guy. Head coach Kevin O'Connell saying after that last week, man, he's going to be the featured roles guy. So look for him to get the volume. People asking if they should start him. I like Ty Chandler this week. I think he's got a safe floor. Especially coming off that big week. Don't expect, the big week that he had, but because Madison's going to be back in the mix. I don't know how much Madison's going to eat, but again, Ty Chandler, after what he's shown, is going to be the guy. So something to monitor. And Chris Olave is expected to play in week 16. He had an ankle issue. Should be good to go. Other than that, there's
I
nothing.
got to say, I do like how Olave has developed with Carr over the course of this year. He's really become Carr's favorite target. That bodes very well for next year. I'm certainly liking Olave going forward.
All right, let's move on. Let's move on to, let's just talk really quickly about the matchups here. Again, we don't want to go through every matchup. We're just going to brief overview on a couple of matchups, just to quick lay it out for you here. Let me take the news and notes banner off because we're not talking about that. So we have one on Thursday. We got the Saints and the Rams. We got 2 games on Saturday. We got Bengals and the Steelers. We got the Bills versus the Chargers on Saturday, December 23rd at 8 p.m. We got a bunch of games on Sunday, and then we got 3 games on Christmas, which is the Monday. Out of all these, Jim, which one are you looking forward to? I think the only good one that I like is Baltimore 49ers on Christmas Day at 8:15. Other than that, man, there's a Dallas-Miami game, 4:25 on Christmas Eve. Other than that, the primetime games don't seem exciting to me, just looking at the quick schedule here.
Yeah, I mean, actually, the Thursday night game looks pretty good. The Saints versus the Rams. I see
Yeah.
here it's got an over/under of 46.5 points. Rams are favored by 4. I think this could be a shootout. I really like that one for upside plays, for especially if Olave plays. I think it'll be really good.
Yeah.
But yeah, I mean, yeah, Detroit, Minnesota looks like it could be pretty good. Although you got Goff on the road.
Yeah. Yeah.
That's a very frustrating prospect. But both those teams are vying for playoff slots right now. Who else? Geez, I'm not really seeing a whole lot here.
No, Patriots and
Um,
Broncos. I mean, I don't care for that, and that's an 8 o'clock primetime game on Sunday. Like, do I really care to watch the lowly Patriots, 3-11 Patriots? It's just, I don't know. Maybe, I guess, if you are a big Belichick fan and you just want to see a couple of his last games with the
yeah, you want to see
Patriots.
his last games coaching the
Kind of
Patriots.
like when Kobe, remember when Kobe was retiring, everybody was like wanting to get to his games. Is it like not even close? It's Belichick,
Right.
So yeah, I mean, like, there's no reason to watch that game. So even like the Christmas Day games, you got the 1 o'clock Vegas versus Chiefs. Chiefs should blow them out. They're a 10-point favorite. And then the Eagles coming off a loss versus the Giants divisional game at 4:30. Again, Jalen Hurts getting a lot of criticism as of late. Maybe I'll watch it to see what Tommy DeVito does. But other than that, man, I mean, everyone's going to be home. So, Jalen Hurts on Christmas. Should be interesting.
Yeah, yeah, and that 49ers Ravens games looks like that could be pretty interesting as well. But yeah, it looks like a couple of blowout games coming on that day. So
Potentially, but again, any given Sunday, sometimes you see these teams like, Carolina beating Atlanta type stuff, right? Like,
yes,
you never
yes.
know. You never know with this game. So, all right, let's go over the optimal players. We'll start off with quarterback position. I'm going to pull up the optimizer here, Jim, and very easy on how to explain this, guys. If it's red, like you see this red on paper, right? This is based on the entire season. They've got a tough matchup versus position. Now, I only use this as a guideline. So, for example, we've got Brock Purdy here, Jim. I don't know if you can see it, but Brock Purdy has a tough matchup versus position versus Baltimore on paper. But Purdy's been consistent. 26 points last week, 25 the week before, 33. If you got Brock Purdy and you don't have a better option, you start him. But this is a good indicator, Jim, that it's a tough matchup versus position. So are you comfortable? I mean, CJ Stroud's listed here, but he's not playing. But Jordan Love, I mean, are you comfortable starting Jordan Love, Brock Purdy, Lamar Jackson, Matt Stafford, any of these guys here that have tough matchups?
I mean, definitely I would consider Brock Purdy, and I would also consider Matt Stafford. I think, like I said, I think that's going to be a high scoring game, and it appears that Cup is kind of back in form. And he's got some good weapons. I mean, Kieran Williams is fantastic. Puka's been fantastic.
Yeah.
So, I'd be comfortable starting those guys, but I don't think any of those other names really interest me.
All right, let's go with the optimal matchups. Again, this is where we talk about on paper versus reality. Now, Zach Wilson's got a decent match.
Right.
See, decent matchup versus Washington.
I don't care if it's the best matchup in the world. I am never, ever starting Zach Wilson.
Now, this is good for DFS. He might be a value play on DFS at best, but yeah, not near semi-playoff, semi-championships, semifinals. Are you starting Zach Wilson?
Right.
Other guys that have good matches, just to note here, right? Tommy DeVito versus Philly, Baker Mayfield, Jacksonville, Nick Mullins versus Detroit, decent matchup. Josh Allen. I mean, this is where this is going to be a huge. There's tons of points to be had here versus the Chargers. He should lay into them, man. I mean, this is going to be exciting to watch if you're a Josh Allen owner, because on paper it looks great. He's been solid. I mean, Josh Allen, if you look at this on paper, man, I mean, he should absolutely blow out the Chargers, Jim. What do you think? I mean, this is a perfect matchup for Allen, don't you think?
Well, I certainly hope so, man. I got him in my FFPC championship league right now, playing for the big money. And I had a good week last week, and he didn't do anything. He only had like 93 passing yards last week, but he got the rushing touchdown. So it kind of salvaged the week. I think he ended up with 15 points, but I would love to see like a 35, 40 point week out of Josh Allen this week. And if he's ever going to get it, he's going to get it here because the Bills are favored by 12. So hopefully that happens.
Absolutely great matchup here. Other guys that have great matchups. Again, this is on paper, guys. Trevor Lawrence, again, he's banged up, so I would probably not start him. Justin Fields, I mean, Chicago versus Arizona, coming off a 12-point week last week versus Arizona, good matchup. And again, Joe Flacco, believe it or not, has been consistent. He's got a good matchup versus Houston. Now, again, I'm not recommending Joe Flacco, but if you're in a 2-quarterback league, could be viable as your second quarterback. Believe it or not, Flacco, can you believe it? Flacco.
I can't believe it, man. It's a blast from the past.
Yeah. Also, again, Mason Rudolph, I would not start anybody from Pittsburgh at all, but they do have a good, favorable matchup versus Cincy. But Will Levis, also a decent matchup versus Seattle. You may want to consider him, again, as a second quarterback type backup type thing.
Yeah, Levis is a tough read, man, because he does look pretty good at times, but then he's just hasn't been very good most of the time. So it's hard for me to trust him even in a good matchup. I'd keep him on the bench.
And some mid-range matchup guys, Jared Goff, Dak Prescott, Jalen Hurts to Pat Mahomes. Now, one thing you want to note here, Dak Prescott, I mean, it's crazy. 7 points last week. He was terrible. He absolutely let a lot of people down. So again, on paper, you guys are aware that he's coming off a tough week and he's got a mid-range matchup. So again, this is just about being aware and then making that decision. Now, would you start Dak Prescott, Jim, Jalen Hurts, mid-range matchup guys? Do you feel comfortable with Dak? I think he could only bounce back from last week, right?
Yeah, I mean, I think when you're playing Miami, it's you're automatically in shootout mode, and I think that's good for Dak. I think he's going to bounce back nicely here. Should be an exciting game. Over/under is 51.5 points. That's great for fantasy. So I would have no problem starting him. And Hurts, I'm never going to sit that guy. He's just because of the tush push, I'm never going to sit that guy because he's gonna get the touchdowns. He's going to be right there. He's going to be the one that's going to get the touchdown if they're near the end zone. So.
All right, let's talk about the guys that have it in tough at the running back position here. Saquon Barkley, man, coming off a bad week.
Barkley, man, it's a shame because his talent is being wasted right now. I mean, that team is so horrendous. There's just nothing he can do about it. It's just like it's like Brees. It's like Brees Hall. Brees Hall is such a talent, and yet he can't do anything because he's on a garbage offense with a garbage quarterback. So, I feel bad for the guys, but maybe that means he'll be a bargain next year on the draft board.
Yeah, and as you guys can see, some people say it's so confusing to follow this. It's not. If it's a red, it's a tough matchup. Like he's playing Philly's rush defense. I don't know what to tell you. It's not that hard. Jameer Gibbs. Okay, so I did some math, man, yesterday. I'm not a math guy, but I did some math. And if Jameer Gibbs had the full volume that was taken away from the pest that is David Montgomery, I really hate David Montgomery, by the way, he would actually be exceeding CMC stats. So he could have been rookie of the year, could have had broke rookie records at the running back position, literally, but he was hindered because 178 attempts went to David Montgomery. And 139 up to this date have been to Jameer Gibbs, and he's had just under 800 yards. So if you double that, you're looking at about, man, at least 1,600 yards on the ground from Jameer Gibbs. That's being conservative because this guy, he's so explosive, and had you give him an extra 140 to 150 attempts to flirt with, this guy was breaking records. So it's just been a very unfortunate year for Jameer Gibbs because of David Montgomery. Montgomery won't go away. It's been something that really, really annoyed me all season, but he's still putting up points, Jameer Gibbs, coming off a 28-point week last week. So, but they do have it in tough versus Minnesota's rush defense, but I'm still starting Gibbs, Jim. That's it. I'm starting him.
Yeah, I mean, I've got no problem starting Gibbs even in a tough matchup. I mean, and he's going to be involved in the passing game. He's the one that's involved in the passing game too. So
Yeah.
that's if Detroit falls behind, he's going to be more involved. Montgomery will take a back seat, but it is like a 50-50 timeshare on this team, and that's just the way of the NFL. And for next year, Montgomery's going to be back. Montgomery signed like a 3-year deal, so it's going to be both Montgomery and Gibbs again.
I
So
hope it
would
doesn't
you
come
take
back.
Montgomery next year? If I'm sorry,
No.
would you take Gibbs next year if Montgomery's still on the team?
I'm debating. That's something I have to make a decision, in the offseason, see how this plays out, see what goes on. But as of right now, I'm very, very pissed off. It's something that really agitates me to watch. It really bothers me. So that's a decision I have to make in the offseason. But right now, I'm very bitter and disgruntled about it. Because again, you're hindering some guy that could be the best running back in the game, and you're hindering him. It just bothers me. Anyway, Alvin Kamara, you got to start him, but he does have it in tough. Ty Chandler, I would go ahead and start him, but he does have a tough matchup against Detroit's rush defense, fourth hardest versus position on paper. Not to say that you got to sit him. He's coming off a 28-point week, and they said he's going to get a featured role. I don't expect 28 points out of him in a relatively tough matchup versus position with Alexander Madison back, but I'm expecting a 14-point floor, I would think. I mean, Ty Chandler should eat, Jim. What do you think?
I mean, he should get the volume. I mean, if Madison's hobbled a little bit, that's and Chandler's healthy, that just they're going to put the ball in Chandler's hands more. Yeah, and this again is another potentially high scoring game. Over unders 46.5 points. And a close game. Detroit's only favored by 3.5.
Right.
So yeah, I mean, I think it's going to be a good situation for all offensive assets on both these teams.
Yeah. Um, there's a chance I think Jonathan Taylor has been out since having surgery. Is he going to be back? If Taylor plays week 16 with check, there's a chance that Taylor could be back.
I haven't heard that. I haven't heard anything about him being back yet.
Again, at the time of this recording, this is Wednesday, so I'm hearing there's a chance. So it's like the old Dumb and Dumber. You're telling me there's a
so
chance.
you're saying there's a chance.
Yeah. Because he's missed 3 weeks. I think he only needed. They were saying 2 to 3 weeks anyway. But either way, I mean, would you risk your fantasy playoffs with Taylor coming back from a thumb thing? I don't know, man. I mean, it's kind of risky, right? Like I don't.
That is a risky, tough call, man. I'm not sure I would trust him at this point, but hopefully he will play this week, and then you'll be comfortable starting him for the championship next week. So.
And then look at this, Christian McCaffrey on paper, 6th hardest matchup versus position. Do you sit McCaffrey?
Yeah, I'm not sitting him. Come on.
I'm sitting him because I don't have him. So he's sitting for me. So yeah, that was the one. That's my Achilles heel this year. Christian McCaffrey absolutely tearing it up. Yeah,
I think he's the only running back in the top 12 that did any good this year. I mean,
yeah,
the top 12 guys have all just had horrendous seasons. It's just there's no other good player. That it's crazy. So
this is a perfect example. Like tough matchup, but you got to start him. Like there's no question about it.
Absolutely. You're never going to sit CMC if he's playing. So who's got a good matchup?
Well, hold on. Gus Edwards, tough matchup. Seventh hardest versus position. Travis Etienne, eighth hardest matchup versus position against Tampa Bay's rush defense, coming off a 10-point game. Singletary's got a tough matchup. Again, I would probably consider flexing Singletary. He's been solid the past couple of weeks. Kyron Williams, you got to start him, but he's also got a tough matchup on paper. And Tony Pollard, also, you want to start him as well if you got him. 11th hardest matchup versus position. So what I'm saying is that if like you got to be aware of this. So for example, if Christian McCaffrey has a bust game, understand you had a tough matchup versus position. If Tony Pollard, ATN, all these guys have major bust games and they're your starting running back, start them. Go ahead, start them, but understand they have a tough matchup and it's always good to know what you're up against going into the week, and that's what we want to do here. So guys that got it in good, Rashawn Johnson here, against Arizona's rush defense. Zeke Elliott versus Denver. I think that's a great start coming off a 10-point week.
Yeah, but I heard Ramadre might be back this week as well. And so if that
Yeah,
happens, it's back to a split backfield. And I don't think you really want to start him maybe as a flex,
as a flex. Yeah, for sure. But again, he's been consistent, but that was Stevenson out. So it's going to be interesting to see. And it's prime time, right? Maybe Zeke's going to want to eat his last time before he goes out to the sunset. Because I don't know how much more Zeke we're going to be getting. Bijan, man, easy matchup versus Indy. So, man, again, are we starting?
Last week was an easy matchup too.
Dude, I don't even know what to say at this point. I mean, at this point, if you made it past last week and let's put it this way. If you made it to the semis and, Bijan gave you 0.4 fantasy points, you got to start him because there's no way but up. Like, I don't know what to tell you. Like, he actually ended up pushing a lot of people out of the playoffs, man, with that performance. It was ridiculous, man. I don't know what. Yeah.
I do not understand that coaching philosophy there. I do not understand what Arthur Smith is trying to do. I mean, is Arthur Smith trying to engineer a better draft position? For the NFL draft. I don't know. But it's just like they keep not using Bijan and they keep losing when they don't use him. It's like, dude, figure it out. It's 1 + 1 = 2. Give the ball to Bijan. Get the ball in his hands. And I don't know. I don't know what's going on with that.
Apparently, I just heard today that they're not going to fire Smith and they're going to let him ride out till the end of the season. So, so we're going to see. They're going to basically base it on how he does in the regular season. So we're going to see a little more Arthur Smith, unfortunately.
Well, yeah, I figured they were going to keep him through the end of the season, but still, it's that was miserable last week, losing to the 1-win Carolina Panthers. Come on, guys. Come on. That is ridiculous.
Yeah. I'm really questioning on whether I want to draft Bijan next year if Arthur Smith's still there. I'm not going to do it. I don't know. We'll see. Again, I got to process this in the offseason, all right?
Right.
Let's rip through this here. Other easy matchups. Derrick Henry coming off a terrible week. Does have it in good. Look for a bounce back there. Breece Hall, terrible week. Breece Hall, Derrick Henry, Bijan. Come on, man. I mean, all you guys have good matchups this week. If you got him, I mean, how do you sit a guy like Breece Hall, who's been relatively consistent down the stretch?
He has not been good this year, man. I mean, he's had like 2 or 3 really good games.
Yeah.
But the rest of the time, he's just saddled on that offense, that awful, terrible, low-scoring offense, and with a terrible quarterback. And it's just like, I would not start him. I mean, there's no reason to start him. If you are this far in the playoffs, because it's no good if he gets you 4 points. Who cares, right?
If you want him, at least he's got a good matchup either way. But yeah, I mean, very inconsistent. But lately, like he had a 27-pointer, 2 weeks ago, to 11-pointer the week after. So yeah, it's weird. Brian Robinson, I think he's a little banged up. Check that situation there. But I don't, trust any Washington running back. They have not been consistent at all, especially in your semis. But on paper, they got it in good. Chuba Hubbard, good matchup versus position, coming off some safe weeks, 12 and 12 points the couple weeks before. Check Pacheco. I don't know if he's going to be back. Have you read anything about Pacheco? If so,
I have not heard anything about Pacheco yet. But Clyde Edwards-Helaire was pretty good in relief of him last week.
Yeah.
So if he misses again, Clyde Edwards-Helaire, you definitely want to fire him up.
Good matchup versus position for Helaire, okay? And a couple other guys here you want to take a look at here. The mid-range matchups. Najee Harris, I don't think he's even going to play. He's banged up.
I wouldn't even play. I mean, don't play him.
And Austin Eckler, just to note here, he's got a mid-range matchup here, okay, against Buffalo.
I wouldn't play him either.
It's just terrible. Like, running backs have been terrible, 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 terrible.
Yeah,
Uh,
just abysmal.
yeah, and I'm just trying to be nice by saying that. So, all right, let's continue on here with the wide receivers here, and then we'll go tight end. We'll give you some optimal defenses here. Now, when I look here, Jim, at the easy matchups here versus position, again, let's be real clear with you guys. If you have a wide receiver that's been performing, go back 3 weeks and take a look. How consistent are they? And then the matchup thing is kind of like the icing on top. But at the end of the day, you got to go with gut feeling because again, it's been very inconsistent at the wide receiver position. Don't think that wide receivers are you're free and clear because you drafted a wide receiver one. Because look at Jefferson last week. Was it the Jefferson show? No, it was the Addison show. So, you got to be careful. So, Giants wide receivers, I would not start any, but they do have a good matchup versus position here. Garrett Wilson, Jim, do you like Garrett Wilson this week versus Washington? Great matchup on paper.
He's been good enough, right? I mean, he's been decent for most of the season. He does get the volume from
Yeah.
Zach Wilson, so yeah, I got no problem starting him. I think he's fine.
Stephon Diggs should have an amazing, amazing game this week on paper. Calvin Ridley, good matchup on paper. Your boy, your main man, your main squeeze, Calvin Ridley, who's been a disappointment all year. What do you think?
No, I wouldn't trust him, especially if Lawrence misses. Geez, there's no way I'm going to trust him on that.
No.
Yeah, and Diggs, I don't know. I don't know what it is with Diggs, but he always disappears during the fantasy playoffs. He did it last year, like where he had like the
Yeah.
monster season, just totally killing it every week, and then week 14 hit, and he just like disappeared, and you didn't hear from him for the rest of the season. I'm afraid that's happening again this year. If he's going to bounce back, it should be this week, and you'd like to see that, but I'm not sure it's going to happen.
He might be like, see this green over here? It might be the Grinch, right? This green could not be a good thing for Diggs, So green could not always mean good. So we'll be careful there. Might Grinch you out. Other
Yeah,
guys.
but I think you got to start him. If you have him, you got to start him. So
Yeah, for sure.
yeah.
Yeah, we don't want that incident where you said that one time. Who was it? DK Metcalf.
DK Metcalf, yeah. Oh, don't play DK Metcalf. Put him on your bench and he gets 3 touchdowns. Yeah, I don't want that to happen.
Yeah, so he's got a good matchup. Diggs has got it good. But we'll see. AJ Brown, good matchup coming off 11 points last week. Be aware of that. Just again, awareness, guys. Look at the matchup. Jefferson, Addison now, both good matchups. Who do you start here, right? I mean, Addison was the guy last week. Is it going to switch over to Jefferson this week? And that's tough, man. I mean, if you got Jefferson, you can't sit him. You got to start him.
Yeah, you got to start him. And I'd start Addison too. I mean, Addison's really come on here towards the end of the season. It's nice to see. But I mean, that's one of those things like next year, how are you going to call that receiving core? Because you've got 3 great receiving assets. Which one do you go with? Because you got Hawkinson there too.
Yeah.
I'm not sure how I would want to play that because there's just too much. Like Seattle's the same way. Seattle has 3 main receiving assets as well, and they're all going to be back next year. And it's like, geez, who's the number one? But even if they are the number one, they're going to be inconsistent because there's a lot of other target competition on that team.
That's the problem. We're getting wide receiver by committee now. It's like the Jerry Rices are going away. So I don't know whether, again, this is a props thing or a bet thing. Like they're changing things up on purpose, but we're going to have to really dive into 16 rounds next year and hone in on who the ones are for each team or the main volume getters. We're gonna look at all the metrics and data on that for sure, and the volume. So again, Hopkins coming off a tough week last week, 4 points. I look for a bounce back, good matchup for his position. Let's rip through this here. You guys take a look here. Green means they've got a good matchup on paper, but you got to go back 3 weeks and check. Have they been consistent? Have they not? Mike Evans, relatively consistent. Had a 2-point week a couple weeks ago. Great matchup versus Jacksonville. I'd go ahead and start Evans. Do you have any debate on Evans?
Yeah, you can't sit Evans, man. You got to play that guy. So
Deontay Johnson, I just did a video. I reshared a video of George Pickens not creating a block. I think it was Jalen Warren going for a run, and Pickens backed away from that block, and he was getting criticized for it. And the reason being is like he didn't want to turn into Tag Dell. I'm like, okay, dude, like it's football. You got to play. You got to block for your team members. So, like what a diva, dude. Like I don't trust Pickens. I will never draft Pickens. Deontay's a diva in his own right, but Deontay's got a good matchup. I would start him, but George Pickens, I'm out on him moving forward, no matter where he
Yeah,
is.
Deontay's been decent the past few weeks. I mean, one of the, if you could even call it a bright spot on a bad offense. But yeah, Pickens hasn't done anything this year. There's been no second year development out of him. So that's, and I don't know how many times that has happened with these number two receivers in Pittsburgh, where they come out and they have a great rookie season, expectations are through the roof, and then they just fade and they don't do anything for the rest of their career. I mean,
Yeah,
I don't get what it is, but that seems to happen a lot
yeah,
with Pittsburgh Steelers receivers, and it appears that it's happening again. So
yeah. It's
yeah.
brutal. All right, other guy. Let's rapid fire here. Let's talk about the good matchups here versus position. Again, DJ Moore, great matchup coming off a 9-point week last week. I would go ahead and start him. Amon-Ra St. Brown coming off a 27-point week. The week prior had a crappy week with 5 points. Good matchup. And Cortland Sutton, again, mid-range matchup here. I would go ahead and start him. Metcalf, I would go ahead and start him. Any objections with some of the guys I mentioned? I mean, Amon-Ra.
No, I mean,
Yeah,
Sutton keeps getting the touchdowns, and as long as he's still getting them, hey man, go ahead and start him because he's going to be valuable. So, but I would definitely for next season, I think there's going to be massive regression as far as Sutton's concerned.
yeah,
This touchdown rate he's been getting has been just through the roof, and he was never a touchdown guy. His whole
yeah.
career, he's never been a touchdown guy. So I would expect some regression next year from him.
All right, let's go here really at the tough matchups here. Curtis Samuel has been consistent the past 3 weeks. He's got arguably one of the toughest matchups against the Jets secondary here. Are you starting Curtis Samuel here?
Nah, I wouldn't trust him. Not in this matchup that they got going on.
Yeah, a tough matchup, but he has been safe the past 3 weeks. And then McLaurin as well, 29 points last week. One of them is going to thrive potentially or put up some points just based on volume. So be careful
I don't know.
there.
That Jets secondary just locks down people. You can't do much against that Jets secondary. So
Cooper Cup. I mean, consistent, man. Look at this. 3 weeks rocking it. Just to note, he does have a tough matchup versus position. So if you're heading in the semis, yes, he's been consistent. Yes, you got to start him. But be aware, it is a tough matchup. So you cannot come down hard on Cooper Cup, even though I will, on my commentary. But yeah, Cooper Cup, got to start him.
yeah, I just like to let everybody know the reason why Cooper Cup is doing well is because 3 weeks ago I traded him on my dynasty team. I traded
Oh,
him for a running back and a first round pick on next year's draft because I couldn't stand him being on my team anymore. And of course, he now starts to play very well. So I think he's fine. I
okay.
think you can go ahead and start him.
Okay. Tougher matchups as well. Continue. Jaden Reed, I still start him. I think him, Dobbs, one of them is gonna break out or not break out, but have a good game. Noah Brown coming off a big week. I would go ahead and start him, man. I mean, it is a tough matchup versus position, but if you don't have a better option, a good flex play. What do you think, Noah Brown? Boom or bust
Yeah, I
guy?
mean, just because the top two receivers are injured with both Tank Dell and Nico Collins. So yeah, I mean, it's like last man standing. And he did get the volume last week. So yeah, just continue to ride that, and hopefully he does well again.
I just note it is a tough matchup. We talked about Pittman, Josh Downs could be a good start, but again, tough matchup versus position. Debo Samuel, tough matchup versus position, but be consistent. I would go ahead and still start Debo Samuel against Baltimore. I mean, this is your wide receiver one, right? So,
Yeah, I
yeah,
mean, Debo's been all over the place, and again, it's that situation where there's four major receiving assets on that team, and every week two of them are going to bust. So uh, so you're just hoping that Debo is not the one that busts this week, but it's going to be a risky start for any of those Niners receivers.
all right, so Tyreek Hill, I mean, he missed last week. It looks like he is expected to play this week. Look for a bounce back. Waddle was the guy last week. Again, that should shift more towards Tyreek this week. What do you think of Tyreek if he plays? Bounce back?
Guy, yes, I mean you don't sit Tyreek, man. I mean, come on, if he's playing, you're playing him. So
Okay, other guys here. Thoughts on? I mean, these are all tough matchups for position, but Devonte Adams, Keenan Allen. I think he's missed practice as well. But again, Devonte Adams. I would say is a must start as well. Even though these guys have tougher matchups, Jim.
yeah, I mean, when you're talking about these top tier talents, you got to play them. If they're playing, you've got
Yeah.
to play them, even if no matter what the matchup is. So yeah, I mean, Devonte Adams, Keenan Allen, if they're playing, play them because they've been very good this year. So
Just take a look here. Demario Douglas, tough matchup versus position here. T. Higgins, tough matchup versus position. But I would go ahead and start T. Higgins if Jamar Chase is out. Should get the volume here. But again, understand it is a tough matchup. All right.
Yeah.
Let's rip through the tight ends and defenses here. Let's go through it. Starting off with the tight ends, who's got it good? Again, with tight end, I don't want to spend too much time on this. I'm going to organize it by good matchups. Jim, if you got a tight end that's putting you 10 points up every single week, you got to start him. Period.
Yeah.
There's no discussion here.
Absolutely.
That's it. There's nothing else to say, but just be aware here. Hunter Henry, good matchup versus position. Pat Fryermuth, good matchup versus position. Cade Auden, inconsistent the past couple weeks. Good matchup versus position here. Higbee, good matchup versus position. Evan Ingram, good matchup versus position. See, as you can see here, versus Tampa Bay. Kincaid, a little banged up. Check the injury stats before the game. Good matchup versus position versus Chargers. He should eat if he plays. Trey McBride, definitely a must start here. Anything else on these guys with good matchup? Darren Waller, he came back now. Should be a good matchup versus position as well.
Yeah, I didn't even see what he did last week.
8 points.
Again,
8 points.
how much?
8 points.
Ugh, yeah, I wouldn't be excited about starting him. Chances are if you drafted Waller, you didn't make the playoffs, so don't worry about it.
Hawkinson, good matchup. Hawkinson as well, good matchup versus position. So, yeah, you got to start Hawkinson. Guys that have it in tough, again, if they put up 10 points, doesn't matter. Got to start him. But Noah Fant, tough matchup versus position. Dalton Schultz, good matchup versus, tough matchup. Tough matchup. Fant, Schultz, couple names here going over. George Kittle, tough matchup versus position, but relatively consistent the past 3 games. You don't sit George Kittle if that's your tight end 1. He is playing Baltimore, so just be aware of that. Isaiah Likely, he's been relatively consistent. Tough matchup, though, versus Sam Fran. Just something to note, though, but Likely could be a safe play this week. And Cole Kmet, you got to start him. He's been safe 10 points. 10th hardest matchup versus position. So, and obviously Laporta, you got to start Kelsey, must starts as well. So that's it for tight end, Jim.
So Laporta has a tough matchup?
No, I got him at mid-range matchup.
Mid-range. Okay, that's good. That's good.
Actually, 12th hardest versus position, so around mid-range versus Minnesota, but coming off the 29-point week, yeah, Laporta never sits. People were asking me last week before his 3 touchdown game. I'm like, do you sit Laporta because he came off a bad week? I'm like, no, Laporta never sits. Like when you get a tight end that's got that type of ceiling and has had those big games, been consistent, you don't sit him. Like it's not hard, you know.
Exactly.
Right.
You just got to hope that Goff doesn't turn into a pumpkin this week because he likes to do that when he's on the road. I don't know what the deal is.
Right.
I don't know what happened during that Chicago game 2 weeks ago.
All right. Couple defenses that look good. Washington versus the Jets. Again, these are jumping out at me. These are green, but sometimes they're green doesn't mean they're always the best start. But Eagles versus Giant, Packers versus Carolina, Jets versus Washington, Broncos versus New England, Texans versus Cleveland. Cardinals versus Chicago looks like an easy matchup, but you never know what Fields could do. Seahawks, Chiefs versus Vegas doesn't look like a bad matchup as well. Anyone else that jumps out at you this week that's a great matchup to stream?
Not really. But that Washington Jets game, I think that's a good defense. Play one of those defenses this week.
Yeah. Yeah, exactly. Those are the ones that are jumping out I think Bills versus the Chargers could be good as well, but that's probably a team that's owned. You probably can't stream them. But that's a great matchup, I think, potentially with Easton Stick playing.
Right. Maybe the Green Bay defense against Carolina.
Yeah,
I think that's probably a good play.
For sure.
Let's see here. Who else has who has really low over under? Oh yeah, the Eagles, of course. You're not gonna be able to pick up the Eagles defense.
No.
There's some good choices here.
Yeah, maybe even Lions versus Minnesota could be good. Who knows? All right, so there you have it, guys. Jim, week 16. For a lot of people, these are the semifinals. In some leagues, it may be the championship. Depends on how your league's formatted. It's been a wild year, and we're going to continue the content here for you guys. So make sure you guys do subscribe, leave a thumbs up, drop your questions below. Try to get to as many possible you can. Jim, that's pretty much it, man. You guys, any motivational words to everybody here?
Oh man, good luck in your in the quarterfinals this week, man. I hope you advance to the championship game, win some money for Christmas presents. It's good stuff.
I think it's semis.
Good luck, everybody.
Semis for a lot of people. I think it's semis for a lot of people. Semifinals.
You're right. Semifinals, exactly. Yeah. The semifinals. Yeah.
All right, guys, we're out. Subscribe, thumbs up, drop your questions below. We'll talk soon. Bye, Jim.